All right, we're being recorded. We are live here with Achieve Unreasonable Results. I'm excited about this program simply because this was something that I wanted to do from the standpoint of growing myself. I'm like everybody else that I will start out with a charge and be super excited, and then somewhere along the way it will either dwindle or completely end, or it actually becomes a habit and we ended up doing it. So, it ends up working out really well. So I think that being able to stay on task, being able to stay focused, to continue with, as we'll talk about today, momentum, to conquer resistance, and to make sure that we're able to stay focused to work out really well. Jennifer, you are welcome. I'm glad that you got that. When it comes, those of us who are in business, especially online, and we send emails out, sometimes we're worried that we're sending out too many, but it always helps to send out that final reminder as far as signups go. Each one of these sessions will probably be 45 minutes to an hour. You will immediately be able to access the recording. This is being recorded in Adobe Connect. There'll also be an MP3 that's usually available by that evening. And the next session is actually going to be a lot closer to February the 1st. I'm going to do these toward the 1st of the month. I don't have an exact set time right now, but we may end up just saying it's going to be at a set time each month, like the first Monday of the month or something along those lines, to be able to get us a little bit of consistency and for you guys to be able to schedule ahead of time a little bit. But you'll always have the replays, and I'm also going to get a transcript done. Generally, that takes 4 to 5 days, just depending on how quick the transcriptionist gets it turned around. And usually, if this is at the end of the week like it is right now, that will cross out the weekends. If we're doing this on Monday, usually transcript will be ready by Friday. So each month, you will get the opportunity to attend live. You'll get the replay, you'll get an MP3, and you'll also get a transcript. So hopefully we cover everybody's learning style. So this month, we're going to look at momentum, how to conquer resistance. I got a lot of great feedback from the series that I did over on the blog and via email about resistance, because I think it's something that we all face and we all come up against. Today's email, the final one in the series, was hitting A Christmas Story, and there is Scott Farkus right there. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie. Raise your hand. Up at the top of the screen, there's a little guy that if you'll press him, it'll raise your hand. Raise your hand if you've actually seen A Christmas Story. All right, pretty good. About half so far have actually seen A Christmas Story. That's one of my favorite Christmas movies, even though it's kind of sad that it's a favorite Christmas movie. It's nothing like something like It's a Wonderful Life. But here's Scott Farkus. He is the bully. He is the guy that terrorizes all of the kids. And finally, Ralphie gets fed up, and he basically attacks Farkus and beats him up while shouting obscenities, even though those aren't actually said in the movies. It was just basically a lot of words you couldn't understand. But finally, he had had enough. And really, that's one of the big keys with resistance, is saying that I've had enough, that I'm not going to put up with this any longer, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to succeed, regardless of what I'm going to come up against, regardless of if it's convenient or not, regardless if it's comfortable or not. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that I'm out there achieving. I'm going to do it on the days that I don't feel like it. When I'm not doing my best, when everything's not clicking, when everything does not seem to go my way, I'm still going to put in the time, the energy, and the effort that is required for me to get this done. So when we're thinking about resistance, we'll spend just a short amount of time really framing it and making sure that we really get what resistance goal is, what its aim is, and what it primarily goes after. So resistance is a repelling force. It's negative. Its aim is to shove us away, distract us, prevent us from doing our work. And that is from the book, Do the Work by Stephen Pressfield. That's the real goal overall of resistance, is to say, how can I prevent whatever our to-do list is? Resistance's goal is to come up with ways for us to excuse ourselves and say that we really either don't have to do it right now or we don't have to do it at all. And we're going to look at 4 major areas that resistance really focuses on, and I think they'll be familiar with all of us. But that's the real key, is that it is a repelling force, and we've all faced that. It's the human condition. We've all come up with ideas that while it was an idea, we loved it. But once we had to start taking action, we started going, I don't know if this was the best idea in the world. And if our action does not come back with the results that we really wanted, that's when we really start talking ourselves out of it. And resistance really gets strong because we can easily back out and easily decide not to do that. So the aim is to shove us away, to distract us, to prevent us from doing whatever our work is, whatever our goal is. Any act, and this is who is subject to resistance, any act that rejects immediate gratification in favor of long-term growth, health, and integrity is subject to being faced by resistance. Anything that we want immediately and we can act on immediately and get a result immediately, we tend to not face resistance on because it's either fun or it's easy, there's no fight involved, and there's immediate gratification. But anything that's going to take time, building a business, losing weight, getting healthy, writing a book, where our list could be so long that and individualized, that those are the things that we are going to face resistance on. If it's not going to be immediate, if we're not going to be able to get it right now, chances are that resistance is going to come up again and again and again along the way because it is long term. We are going to have to endure the valleys with the peaks. There are going to be times in which we're speeding along and it's easy and it's simple. And there are going to be times where we feel like this was insane. Why in the world did I even do this? If I give up, nobody will really know. Nobody will really care. And it's pretty easy to back up. When I think about every year that I get started with fitness, and yes, I'm doing it once again. I've made the vows to lose this weight that I've regained the last 3 months of the year when I've focused entirely on eating. And I can tell you that I've mastered it. I don't know that there's anything else I can learn about eating. I've mastered that and weight gain. And so at the beginning of the year, when I decide, you know what, I need to lose this extra weight. If I decide tomorrow that I don't want to lose this extra weight, do you know how many people are actually going to care? Maybe zero. Maybe 1 or 2 family members. But that's about it. Chances are pretty high that my friends are not going to call me and say, how is the workouts going? How's your eating going? And let's say, you know what? That just wasn't working for me. I found out that I really mastered eating and mastered weight gain. And so that's what I'm going to do. I wouldn't really have that many people who cared. And so resistance can easily come in and talk us out of anything that is long term. So when we're going into whatever it is, whatever our work is, that we realize is going to take more than a day, we've got to focus and be prepared on facing resistance because it's absolutely going to come. Resistance pushes against you and makes it hard, if not impossible, to start. It prevents movement, which prevents momentum. So that's a real key for me, is that every day I really have to start. Every day is a new start. And so resistance comes in to make it hard, if not impossible, to actually start. And one of the series emails that I wrote about going and running on January the 2nd, I don't believe I've been out since then. Why? Because of resistance. And how did resistance work in my case? I love to lift. I need to run, but I love to lift weights. I love to be in the gym. It's a lot easier for me. So resistance came in and said, Paul, guess what? If you'll just go to the gym and control your eating, you don't have to run. You see, it stopped me from starting. Now, I've got in my mind that I'm going to start running again. Y'all can try to hold me accountable to it in the Achieve Facebook group. But the truth is, it gave me an alternative. So resistance doesn't always just shut us down. It may do that distraction business. If you'll just go to the gym, which you love, and it's still healthy, and it's still going to advance you toward the goal, but it's not going to be near as fast as running is. But it prevents me from starting. And each day requires a new start. And if we don't start, we don't move. And if we don't move, we don't gain momentum. So that's kind of an overview of resistance, what it is, and what it really wants to prevent us from ever doing, and that's our work. So we're going to look at the 4 greatest hits of resistance. These are the way that this bully punches us. It's the way they hit us. So number 1 is procrastination. I think we've all been guilty of that. I'll do it, I promise, just a little later. Now, I remember one of the worst spankings I ever got in my life. And I don't know if that's politically correct to say that you got spanked growing up nowadays, but it's just a fact it happened. It was one day that my mom asked me to take the garbage out, and I procrastinated. And she said, Paul, I need you to take the garbage out. I said, I will. And then she kept pressing me and said, Paul, you need to take the garbage out now. And I said, if you want it out now, you can take it out yourself. Guess how well that worked out? It did not work out at all. I still remember that spanking. It was pretty strong. And guess who took out the trash immediately? That's right, because there was punishment involved. So with each one of these greatest hits, I don't want to give you a punishment, but I want to give you a word to anchor as the block to this hit. So as we're in self-defense mode, momentum is going to be our offense, but these words against resistance are going to be our defense. This is how we block their greatest hits. So when procrastination comes in and says, I'll do it later, I promise, then here's the word. Now. The word's now. Anytime we begin to delay, we need to think now. That's the only thing that is going to block this punch from resistance. When we come up with a reason why we can wait, we need to go ahead and do it now. I might say, you know what? If I leave for the gym, the truth is, I've got this appointment coming up, and I'm only going to be able to be in there 10 minutes, and it's really just not worth it. I'll just wait, and I'll go this afternoon. What's the chance of me actually making it in that afternoon? Maybe 50-50. But if I go now, I'm guaranteed to get the 10 minutes in. And that 10 minutes is better than no minutes. See, on our minds, we've got the grand scheme of how things are going to go, how much time we're going to put in, what that's going to look like, and what that's going to feel like. If anything comes against us that changes that picture, we decide that it's better to wait so that we can fulfill the entire vision instead of doing something now that is less than we originally intended. But the real key is that we do something now, no matter how small, no matter how little. I've written a pretty good bit about being involved in Jeff Gowen's 500 words challenge this month. Sometimes I can sit down and write all 500 words. Other times I might get to 50. It's all the time that I had in that moment. But I did the 50. Procrastination, as resistance comes against us and hits us, procrastination says, I'll do it. It's not that we're saying we're not going to do it at all. I promise, just a little bit later. So our key word, our anchor, make sure you write it down, is now. It's better to do a little now than nothing later. And if we're going to put it off, we need to look at our own percentages of our own life. How often when we put it off and said, I'll do it later, how often did we actually do it? Chances are pretty high that it's not much. So greatest hit number 1, procrastination. Greatest hit number 2 is insecurity and doubt. Who am I to, and then fill in the blank. Whatever it is that we're working on, when we get into the work itself, we will often find that we have a gap. Maybe we didn't know enough. Maybe we didn't have enough experience. Maybe it wasn't as easy as we had thought it would be. And so we begin to doubt ourselves. We begin to tap into our own personal insecurity, and we begin to question. So who am I to do whatever it is that we're working on? Who am I to write this book? Who am I to release this product? Who am I to publicize this blog? So we get insecure and we become very doubt-filled about our ability to deliver X, Y, and Z. Now, one of the biggest reasons is that we tend to compare ourselves to everybody else's highlight reel. You've heard this probably 1,000 times. We take the blooper reel of our life and we compare it to everybody else's highlight reel. But the truth is, nobody has a true highlight reel. Everybody's got the blooper reel too. We tend to think that those highlights are their existence. Nope. There's been a lot of editing involved to make it look like that they're perfect. And we compare ourselves to them and we start thinking, well, who am I to even do this? Why in the world should I put this out there? Why in the world should I think that I've got the ability to do X, Y, and Z? So instead of thinking, who am I? Here is your key word. So procrastination, your key word, your anchor word was now. With this, with insecurity and doubt, the key word is responsibility. Responsibility. Write that down. Because the question is not, who am I to X, Y, and Z? The real question is, what will happen if I don't? What will go unsaid? What will be left undone? Who will go unserved? So our responsibility is to pursue our goal, not simply for the betterment of ourselves, but for the betterment of other people. So what happens if I lose this weight? Maybe I can play more effectively with Stephen if he's wanting to do some football. Maybe if he wants to go out and run, I can actually make it more than past or to the mailbox. Maybe make it past the mailbox. So what goes undone? What will happen if I don't? So when we face insecurity and doubt, the key word is responsibility. We've got to see beyond ourselves to realize the impact that we're going to have on other people. So let's take a blog post, for example. I can't tell you the number of things that I've written that I think weren't any good, were not worded correctly. There's always the threat that I'm going to be hit by the grammar police. I mean, I live in Alabama. What is a comma? We don't know. Sentence fragments are our existence. We can turn a one-syllable word into a five-syllable word. Right? So this is my background. So anything that I publish is at risk. What right do I have? But I can tell you, there have been a lot of things that I've published that there's been incredibly positive feedback from it. Even this series this week about resistance. I got so many emails from people saying, that's me. That's exactly what I'm facing. Wow, you put it into words. Or I enjoyed the writing style. And I don't even consider myself a writer. Now, if I had not published those articles, there would have been people who would have given up, who would have stopped, who would have accepted the excuse, who would not have moved forward. And the truth is, I wouldn't have moved forward either if I'd not published those. I could have shrunk back and decided not to and said, who am I to do this? But instead, I saw it as a responsibility and said, what will happen if I don't? Now, did I get grammar corrections? Absolutely. Did I have people who disagreed with what I wrote? Absolutely. But that doesn't bother me. I'm a lot more concerned about who has helped than anything else. Now, that's going to lead directly into this next one, and that is judgment/critique. This is another one of the greatest hits. What will everybody think? What review will I get? You know, I automatically know every time I put something out there, somebody's going to write me and correct my grammar. Most of the time, they're super, super sweet. Every now and then, there's the person who will write in and say, you know, if I can't trust you to understand what a run-on sentence is, then I can't trust you to buy a product. I'm thinking, fine, we're probably not going to get along, right? So what will everybody think? What review will I get? We're worried about being judged. We're worried about being critiqued. So here's your key word to write down. Service. Service. It's about serving other people. It's not about winning an Academy Award if I happen to be a speaker or a video blogger. It's not the Writers Guild. I don't have to worry about those critiques. So I mess up. It's no big deal. Can people understand what's being taught and apply it? That's my major goal. Can they get the idea and apply it to their life for betterment? And if so, I feel like I've really done my job. So we need to focus on those who love, not on those who hate. Because 9 times out of 10, or maybe even a little bit higher than that, the person who comes in with the unsolicited critique is not doing it for you. They're doing it for them. They want to tell other people how they critiqued you, how they helped you. They don't really care about you. They care about them. So when we start understanding that those who do want to judge and those who do want to critique are not really trying to help a lot of times, if they're doing it mean, they're doing it sweet and playful, and hey, I just thought you might want to know that you misspelled this word or used the wrong word here. There's no big deal about that. But the people who are arrogant, people who act like they are better than, those are the people that you really don't need to be concerned about. Because most of the time, those folks don't really have an audience. Nobody's really paying much attention to them. Think about the last person who is highly critical that you love to be around. Exactly. So we don't need to worry about these folks too much. We need to focus on those who have a spirit of love, not on the spirit of hate. And you can't please everyone. So we don't need to take it personal, because the chances are we're not close to these folks anyway. So I know that's kind of tough for us because our writing is personal, our products are personal. But I've got to tell you, there are going to be some people that just don't click with you. Don't click with your personality, don't click with your style. I have that. You think about in our political system. If they can get 51% to vote for them, they are thrilled. So why in the world do we have to have 100% in order to be satisfied? Now, being from the public speaking world, professional speaking world, go places, they'll hand out review sheets. I cannot tell you the number of times where I've met with speakers who had that one review sheet that was bad, and that's all they focused on. I'm like, you got 99 positives. Why are you worried about this one negative? Well, they said X, Y, and Z about me. I said, you don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know if they're having a bad day. You don't know if they're struggling. You don't know if somebody recently experienced disease or loss in their family and they're just not able to cope and they're taking it out on you. You don't know if they've had a series of bad decisions that are coming back to bite them. So, the key is to focus on us serving people and not worry about the handful, the very minuscule amount who are actually going to come in and critique. And then number 4, the greatest hits, excuses or reasons, as we like to call them. It's too hard. It's too early. I'm too busy. Too whatever. We'll get into that mindset and have all these excuses and reasons. Now, granted, there are times that there are actual emergencies that will cause us not to do our work. But most of the time, we're inventing something. One of the reasons that I didn't run is it was too cold. Listen, I could go out there in layers, but nope. It was 17 degrees one morning, so I said that was too cold. I've got plenty of paraphernalia around here to make myself warm out in 17 degrees. I didn't want to go. So your word, and I'm going to use the light version. You can use the heavier version if you want to. Your anchor word for your excuses and reasons is bullcrap. It's bullcrap. You can use the harder word if you want to. But most of the time, our excuses and our reasons for not doing something is just that we're spoiled and that we're lazy and that we've had it too good and we've had it too easy. I'm going to use one of my favorite quotes that I used in 5 Stones as well. It's from Brian Tracy's book, No Excuses. The successful focus on pleasing results, while the unsuccessful focus on pleasing methods. Listen, I have to apply that to me. Why did I not run? Because it was not a pleasing method. If I'd been focused solely on results, I would have gotten out there. Most of the time, our excuses are just bull. It's just stuff that we're making up to give us a pass and to give us an out. So we covered resistance and we covered the 4 greatest hits. I'm going to pull the chat box over. Is there anything else that you can think of, like as a greatest hit that you want to add to the fray here, or anything that you want clarified about resistance or about the greatest hits that we've covered so far? Got one typing. And just raise your hand if that clarifies some things for you. Hey, Jennifer, absolutely. Fear absolutely comes into play. When we're afraid, part of that could be insecurity, judgment, being judged as part of fear. And so fear absolutely comes into play. It could be that we're afraid of succeeding. You know, I often heard that growing up, to be afraid of success. It sounded crazy. But the truth is, when we're successful, a lot of things go away. In particular, a lot of people go away because they don't like our success. Their attitude changes. They start becoming judgmental about us as a person and not simply about our work. And so fear can certainly come into play. If we think that we're going to fail and that we're not going to reach that goal that we really determined we wanted, or we're not going to get that job that we worked so hard for, the fear of not accomplishing can be one of resistance's greatest hits, coming against us and preventing us from going forward. All right, so I'll move the chat box back over and we'll go into momentum. So gaining and keeping momentum to me is really key, because this is what I've found resistance fears the most. Because when someone's standing still, it's pretty easy to control them. But when they are moving, first you've got to catch them, and then you've got to be stronger than they are in order to take control, right? Well, momentum is a key in overcoming resistance. So we're going to look at actually how to do that. It begins with start. Momentum begins with starting, with taking that step, with that initial movement, no matter what. So that can include understanding our stuck words. Now, each one of us has a different soundtrack that plays when resistance comes up against us. Each one of us have a different excuse or a different reason. So like I mentioned, the 17 degrees. Those were words that actually went through my mind. It's too cold out there. I don't really need to go. It's not going to, I'm not going to enjoy it. Listen to those words. It's too cold. I don't really need to go. I'm not going to enjoy it. So I actually wrote those words down. Those are the words that keep me stuck. And then what I do is I take those words and I try to look at those and say, what's the overall principle here? And the principle was comfort. So comfort was something that I was not willing to give up in order to start. So begin before you even start. Once you start making that move, the words are going to start hitting your head. The reasons, the judgment, the excuses, the procrastination, those words are going to start hitting your head, and you need to write those down, because what you're going to find is that you have a pattern of a principle that is at play. For me, and probably for many of you, it's comfort. I want things to be enjoyable. I want to like them. I don't really like discipline because that's uncomfortable. So stuck words, the principle that is at play there, and then to see if it is a pattern. Next is to simply move, to actually do something. The truth is that if we'll go ahead and get out there, even in the cold weather, and start moving, we will warm up. What we don't like is the immediate discomfort. The first words that we put on the page usually do not flow. They're not warm. We've not warmed up yet. We're not in our flow. We're waiting for inspiration to strike, but instead, we don't want to begin because it doesn't feel good. But once we move, we begin to warm up, and whatever that thing is that we're working on, that's when we hit our stride, that's when we hit our flow, and that's when we really start kicking it in once we've warmed up. But we can't get warm until we start moving. One of my buddies, Jeremy Vest, is a runner, and I remember a couple of years ago when I was running pretty regularly and got up to where I was running about 10 miles at a time, fairly regular. So I remember the first time that I went to run with him, I said, well, what are we going to do? He said, well, the first thing to remember is that mile 1 is really a warm-up. I had never in my life thought that a mile was a warm-up. I was always thinking survival. If I can make it past that first mile, if I can make it past that turnoff down at the end of my road, then I know that I'm just going to have to keep going and it's too late to turn back. That's the way that I processed. But he said the first mile is the warm-up. So when we write, what if the first 200 words are the warm-up? Or if we're doing a blog post, the first 100 words is a warm-up. If we're getting in and we're having to do something mechanical in our business, the first 30 minutes of work is simply a warm-up. And we don't like thinking that way because we want every single moment to count. We want every single action to count. But the truth is, until we're warmed up, we're really not going to do our best work. But we've got to start. We've got to move in order to get warm and for things to really start clicking. Reject perfection. Years ago, I was in a mastermind where one of the guys was continually trapped by perfectionism. If it wasn't, in his mind, perfect, he just couldn't get it done. He said, so Paul, what's your secret? I said, my secret is rapid imperfection. I do things quick and sometimes as wrong as possible just to make sure that I started moving, just to make sure that I got it done. I can go back and edit later, whatever that edit may look like. So one day a workout may seem perfect. The next day the workout may seem the worst ever, but I can go back and edit that. I can go back and see what needs to change and what needs to be altered. But it has to begin by rejecting perfection. If it's going to be in what I'm envisioning as perfect, and I'm not going to be able to ship until then, if I'm not going to be able to release until then, chances are I'm never going to get it done. I'm never going to complete it. So I've got to make sure that I'm rejecting perfection. Now, when I put it out there, is there a higher risk of judgment there? Absolutely, there is. But it's better to release it and even be judged than not release it at all. The failure to release, the failure to ship, what it does to our spirit can prevent future action. Whereas when we release it, at least we've done something. If we get out there and start and we begin to run, we've gone farther than everybody else who's sitting on the couch, right? Everybody else who's laying there eating their chips as they flip through mindless channels. So we've got to reject perfection. We've got to move out and make sure that we're making the effort. Small is fine. Like I mentioned earlier, it's better for me to go to the gym for 10 minutes than not go at all. It's better for me to run that half mile than not to run at all, even if I had 10 miles in mind. Small is fine. It's no big deal if you don't get it all in. And then practice. This is something that has helped me in early stages of something new. So if I'm starting something new, I look at it as practice instead of perfection and instead of being a professional, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So what I'm trying to do is actually practice this. I'm trying to learn this. I'm trying to get data and feedback to understand where I am, what I'm doing, and what my expectations should be. Instead of having the preconceived idea of what it's going to be like, then when it doesn't meet expectation, then I get side-railed, then I get thrown off the tracks. I'm just practicing. I'm seeing what this feels like. I'm gathering the data based on it to see what I'm going to do differently next time. So a big key in gaining momentum is to actually start, to get some movement. So after start, we string. We start stringing this together and we make sure that we now have some consistency. As I wrote this week, that resistance doesn't care about the MacBook Air that we bought to write our blog on. It doesn't care about the best running shoes on the market that we bought to run in. It doesn't care that I've decided to go organic with all of my food so that I'll be healthy. Because as long as I don't eat that food, as long as I don't run those steps, as long as I don't write that post, it doesn't matter that I bought all that stuff. Resistance doesn't care. We can make all the purchases in the world. It gets scared when we start putting together successful starts. When we string together successful starts, resistance starts getting nervous because now it's got to catch us. Now it's got to wrestle us down because now we've got some speed. We've got some momentum. So the key is to take the next step. No matter what, we've got to be consistent. Resistance doesn't care that I do something one day. It doesn't really care that I do it 2 days in a row. But 3 and forward, it starts getting really nervous because I'm going to be pretty hard to slow down. I mean, I'm 5.5.5. I've got a low center of gravity. I'm not easy to take down. Take the next step. Set an alarm. If you need to do this, this is what I do. I set an alarm for tasks that have to be done. I leave for the gym almost every single morning at 5:30 a.m. That's my alarm. That's not when I get up. I tend to get up about 4:30 and start working. But no matter what I'm doing, when 5:30 hits, that is where my string either continues or it doesn't. Is my winning streak going to keep going, or am I going to falter? And that alarm hits me and reminds me. Now, it doesn't mean that resistance totally disappears. So this morning, I was halfway through resistance part 4. I was halfway through writing that. 5:30, the alarm goes off. I had a decision to make. I'm kind of in the flow right now. If I leave and go work out, I could come back cold. I might not get this done. I might not get this out on time. You see, resistance. Even though I've had a string of days in the gym, I've got a winning streak going. But I thought, you know what? If I break it, if I excuse it now, it's going to be easier to excuse it tomorrow. So I got in the car, rode to the gym, had really a great workout, one of the best workouts I've had this year. Came back, ate some breakfast, got ready, sat back down at the laptop, and continued where I left off. Because the truth is, even though I'd gotten warmed up and I'd cooled off a little bit mentally from being disengaged and going to the gym, I was able to read back through what I'd written and kind of catch that fire a little bit again. But I set that alarm and I had to go to the gym at that time because I can tell you right now, especially after teaching this afternoon, there's no way that I would have made it to the gym. I wouldn't end this webinar and go, I'm going to run out to the gym now because I will be tired. This is a different type of energy for me. So if you want to make sure that you continue, set an alarm for every task, especially if it is a recurring event. And this is a great thing about living in the age that we live in. We can get in our Google Calendar and set an alarm for everything. And maybe you're doing something on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then set that for that recurring event, get that reminder, and then you may even want to put in the reminder. This is what I'll do when I set an alarm for a recurring event. It'll pop up in my text messages, and it'll tell me what it is. So let's say it's write blog post, and I don't really like to write a blog post. It'll say write blog post - stay committed. Don't let resistance win. Right? That's totally different in my mind than it simply saying write blog post. Most of you are probably strong enough to see that reminder and you're good to go. Not me. I need to see stay committed. Don't let resistance win. Sometimes it'll say you made a vow. Don't give up, fat boy. Right? So that kind of thing will get me charged up a little bit too. So set the alarm. If you've got a recurring event, make sure that it has a phrase in there as a reminder. If you are the person who reacts well to praise, then you can say something along the lines of, hey, you completed this yesterday. Keep going. You know you can do it. If you're like me, that praise on some things work and then the negative on other things work, like if I call myself fat boy, that works out pretty well. That motivates me. I don't get depressed by that. I'm like, man, I better get out there. That reminder was true. So recurring event, you need to make sure you set it for. And then if you like an app, something like I Run, You Run, and you can do this in your browser online as well. I really like this as a tool, and it reminds me as well, keeps up with what I've done, gives me reminders of what I've not completed. And so it's a great little tool to use if you want to string it together and you're a little bit more on the tech side. If not, if you want to use a notebook, use a notebook. If you want to use Google Reminders, let that remind you. I find that that really works the best for me, is really using my Google Calendar. Works better than just anything else for reminding me and making sure that I get that string together. And it really is essential that you get that consistency there. And then sting. You know, when we're really beating up the bully of resistance and we're really stinging them pretty hard, there's a couple of things that we need to do. Number one, we need to evaluate. We need to look at what we're doing and we need to write down what's working. For example, if you are writing a blog post and you want to channel somebody else's writing, or somebody else's writing actually gets you in a better mood or a better place or motivates you, or if you can watch a movie that really motivates you, if there's a clip that you really love that just fires you up, watch that clip. Evaluate what got you ready to start and what keeps you in the string when you start stringing all of these successes together. So you evaluate what works. When you're actually writing, you think about why it's flowing so well. When you're creating a product, you write down what seemed to really go right today and why it went right. So you evaluate your successes and even your failures, and you discover exactly what's working, what isn't working. Most of us are doing guesswork. We are envisioning what we want to happen, but we really don't have any data to back that up. We just think that we're able to do it. But evaluations allow us to know exactly what we are able to do. We evaluate it and we move forward. Now, on the failure side, we look at the things that aren't working and we eradicate those. We get rid of those. We decide that we're going to stop doing that. I don't know if any of you have read the books Grain Brain and Wheat Belly. Raise your hand if you've read Grain Brain or Wheat Belly. I'm seeing 1, 2, okay, a couple of hands. You know, when you get into studying that and you study gluten and you study the effects of the processing of our food, you know, it radically starts changing your outlook and your view of things, and you start becoming a lot more conscious of why you feel the way you do after you eat certain things. And so let's say that every time that you go out and you eat a quesadilla, you get bloated. And you've never really thought about it before, but this time you're so uncomfortable, you start thinking, now what caused that? And you obviously think, that's not working. I'm not going to do that anymore, right? So that's the logical thing to do. It's amazing so many times in our life where we keep repeating things that fail because we simply don't pay attention. So as we evaluate the successes, we continue to do those. Those become part of our start and our string. And then we eradicate the things that are causing the failure, and we try to eliminate those as much as possible so that we are not repeating those. And so those are really the key elements in momentum. I know that seems overly simplistic, but it really is that simple, and it really is that easy most of the time to beat resistance. If we'll string those starts together, and if we'll sting resistance by evaluating and eradicating anything that really does not need to be there. We got one more section to cover, and that's on amateur and pro. But before we leave this section, do you have any, let me move the chat room. Do you have any questions about this particular section? Or anything that you would like to add to this section? Anything that works for you that you feel particularly connected to? Susan's typing. So the overall momentum formula here is super, super simple, but we've really got to start focusing on it. So Susan says, stop, start, continue is another great exercise that's similar. I love that. You know, we've got to do that, right? And we've got to continue as a really key element that most of us allow an excuse or reason or procrastination or whatever to come in and pull us back and to say, you know what? It's just not worth it. I'm not going to continue. I'm not going to keep going. But we've got to be able to do that. And evaluation is a big part of that as well. I don't know how many of you guys regularly write things down, but it's really important to do that, to keep a record and to make sure that you're watching the pattern of what is creating your successes and doing that over and over and over again. All right, I'll move the chat back over. We'll hit this last section. That's amateur to pro. And he's actually got a book called Turning Pro, Stephen Pressfield does. It's not quite as good to me as The War of Art and Do the Work. It's still pretty good. But I've got a couple of quotes here out of Do the Work. An amateur plays for fun. The professional plays for keeps. An amateur plays for fun. Professional plays for keeps. You know, that's a pretty big key for us to realize that it's not a hobby. That what we're involved in is not something that we're simply doing because we thought we'd enjoy it. Certainly there can be those elements, but the things that we're ultimately serious about, we've got to be playing for keeps. We've got to be focused on doing it for a lasting reason and not simply for the short term. The amateur plays part-time, the professional plays full-time. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to be involved in an activity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it means that we really do think about it, that it really is part of our life, that it's not simply something that gets this little bitty portion that we toss some time to, but we're really engaging and we're setting aside time purposeful so that we make sure that we get the greatest results. So when we look at it as an amateur, I'm going to have all kinds of reasons why I can't, why I don't want to, etc. But as a pro, I decide that this is it. I'm going to, quote, make my living based on this. That if I get really serious about health, then things really shift and really change, and I really do get out there and run the way that I'm supposed to. Or when I look at my business, I really get serious about my metrics and my analytics to make sure that I'm measuring those results to see what is producing the result that I want or is giving me the result I don't want and why. So once I start looking at that, thinking through that, processing that, then I can make some adjustments that the next time around it tends to work out really well. That doesn't mean that there aren't bad days. You look at professional players out there, professional athletes, and they have good days and they've got bad days, but they're still the pros. They don't have a bad game and go, you know what, I'm just going to quit. They go, you know what, had a bad game tonight. You've got to turn it around. Who knows, I might be on a winning streak next week. You know, that's what the pro knows. The pro knows that one bad day is not defeat. But the amateur, they'll quit. They'll pack up their gear. They'll put it in the closet. They'll swear that they're never going to do this again. The pro says, you know what? I'm dedicated to this. Today didn't go well. Tomorrow may not go well. But at some point, it's going to turn around. So professional plays full time. And then finally, one quote to close us out. Someone asked Somerset Maugham if he wrote on a schedule or only when struck by inspiration. I write only when inspiration strikes, he replied. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 o'clock sharp. That's a pro. That's the real key for us in building overcoming resistance, is to say that we're not going to wait for inspiration to strike. We're not going to wait till it feels right. We've got our time. And we go out and we simply do the work. That's the real key when it comes to momentum and conquering resistance. Any final comments that you guys have or that you want to add? The replay will be available here in about 10 minutes within the site if you want to go back through and look at any of this. I'll also get the screens, put those in a PDF, and you go back and review that as well. Several folks typing. Transcript should be ready sometime next week. Hey, you are welcome. I hope this has been helpful for you guys. Just raise your hand if this has been helpful, and you can see how this is going to help you overcome resistance and get more done. Awesome. Good. Awesome. Good. Thanks, Shauna. Thanks, Steve. Perfect for January. You're welcome, Susan. Love that. Good. Thank you so much, Sue. Lots to think about and how to change. All right, Lane. And guys, really this stuff is pretty simple to do, but it's still a battle for us to do it. And I'm in the battle with you. So this week, as you're facing some difficulties, some challenges, feel free to post those in the Facebook group. Say, I'm really having a hard time with this. I need, what are some hints that you guys have to keep going when you're in a battle like this? So don't be afraid to post that. Or if you've got something that really encourages you, put that in the Facebook group as well. Jennifer says, thanks, Paul. This has encouraged me to get out there and continue posting on Facebook and Twitter, even if I feel scared. Absolutely, Jennifer. It can be your responsibility because something that you post and something you say can make all the difference to the life of somebody else. You never know the difference that you're going to make. And a lot of times you'll make a difference and nobody will tweet you back and nobody will make a comment and maybe nobody even likes that particular post. So don't even judge that. Don't judge engagement to make you feel like whether that was quality or not, or whether it was worth it or not. I can't tell you that the number of posts that I've read that I've never made a comment on, that I've never liked on Facebook and never retweeted. I think we've all done that, but it doesn't mean that it hadn't made an impact. So Jennifer, get out there, do your work, because we've got a responsibility to put it out no matter what. And don't forget some of those key phrases that we hit earlier. When you start to hold back and you start to procrastinate, remember the word now. When you feel insecure, remember the word responsibility. When you feel judged or critiqued, remember the word service. And when you start making excuses and reasons why you can't, just remember the word bull and realize that we're all making up things that really aren't in play.